another episode of This Week in Indies as we discuss the editing process and what that entails. How many steps are in the editing process? Where do alpha readers, beta readers, and ARC readers fall in that process? Do you have to use them? We'll discuss these questions and more as we sit down with a knowledgeable group of authors at the round table. Later, we'll hear from C.L. Cannon as she brings us a fascinating collection of indie books similar to Super Fudge by Judy Blume. We spend the last 5 minutes with Wayne Turmel as he brings us a sample of his latest release and shares with us what's to come. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, get ready to enjoy the show with today's host, Madilynn Dale. Hey everyone, we're back for another This Week in Indies, and I am ecstatic to be here this morning. We've got a great topic, the editing process, and this is so different for each author. It's just, there's so many possibilities that you can do, different methods and steps, but we're going to explore that more in depth. But before we get started, I'm Madilynn Dale, this week's host. I'm a fantasy fiction author. I write in paranormal, romance, kind of mixed genre, and you can find all of my stuff on my website here. But let's bring up our amazing and fantastic roundtable. Here they are, guys. Aren't they gorgeous? I mean, look at these guys. We're going to go around and let everybody introduce themselves, and we'll start with Miss Anita.
Okay, hi, I'm Anita Stewart. I write under AF Stewart. I write horror and darker fantasy, all things dark and stabby. I also write a little poetry, and I do feature TV articles for CBR.
Nice to have you here, Anita. JD.
Greetings, fellow humans, and welcome to Spooky Time with Books. I am an indie author from Puerto Rico. I have my Puerto Rico cub because I am toasting to their good health during Hurricane Fiona, which is picking things up. So good luck, people. I write urban fantasy, poetry, nonfiction, delving into the world of horror in Spanish and in middle grade, because why limit yourself?
Yes, it's great to have you here. And new to our show, Mr. Wayne Turmel. Go ahead and tell us about yourself, sir.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Greetings from Las Vegas. My name is Wayne Turmel. I write a whole bunch of stuff. I write nonfiction to keep the rent paid and keep the dreaded day job happy, but I mostly write fiction to save what's left of my sanity. I started in historical fiction and then made a left turn into urban fantasy, and the second book in my Johnny Lycan Werewolf PI series is coming out in December. So very excited about that, and lovely to be invited to play in the sandbox.
Yes, it's great to have you here. And then we have the famous Jim Nettles.
Famous.
Yes.
Yeah, whose office is more of a disaster than usual. Hi, I'm Jim Nettles. I write science fiction, urban fantasy, bit of horror, bit of this, that, and the other. I also write nonfiction, business entrepreneurship. I'm founder for Author Essentials and Author Essentials Workshops, where we do all the business stuff for writers. I am the business track director for the Speculative Fiction Academy, and I am the VP and technical director and one of the founders for the Continual Convention, where we do all the fun online stuff and sometimes get to partner up with Go Indie.
Yes, and it's a pleasure to have you on today. So, guys, we've got a couple of comments already. We got JD, who's breaking the fourth wall first thing this morning. We got Joe watching on. Fabulous group for sure. We got Deborah hanging out with us. JD saying hi again. And Joe, infamous, more like it. I mean, So, guys, the editing process. I know we all have writing in different genres and whatnot, but how many steps do you actually feel goes into the editing process? I know we referenced a couple of articles and both of them had a different number of steps, which was fascinating to me because I'm curious, what is the actual number of steps?
Well, in Puerto Rico, there's a thing called the San Juan. You celebrate the Saint John's evening. So what you do is at midnight, you jump back in the water, either 3 times, 7 times, 11 times, whatever many times. Depends on where you're from. It's going to vary. And I think the editing process is pretty similar because for me, it depends on the project. Some projects need more TLC than others. Others, you go like, this needs work. This is kind of a steaming pile, and others just it's from the first crepe. It's beautiful, and you go like, I don't know how I did it, and I don't care. I'll just take that win.
Nice.
Yeah, I have 2 steps. I write a first draft, then I edit it till I'm satisfied it's readable.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Wayne.
Well, I was just going to say it depends, I think, on what I'm writing, because a lot of my fiction, I have a critique group that I use as I'm writing the darn thing and creating it. And so a lot of the editing still happens in the test tube. And so if I do that, there's generally less editing on the other end. So it depends if I'm writing, totally in my own little bubble, or if I'm doing something as part of my critique group. Depends how many steps we have in the editing process.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the big it depends, and it depends on what it is, because for a lot of nonfiction, and I got my start in media and print media in the days where you had, from the time you were doing something with a story to the time it went to print might be 12 hours. So the amount of time you had to sit there and write something tight and get it done and get it out the door was really kind of limited. It might get one editorial pass, and then the editor gets it, they bleed on it, you fix a couple of things, and you're done and out in a couple of hours. For some of the things I do today, I may spend a week or 2 working on an article or a longer piece, but for the most part, those get turned around quickly. If you're talking fiction, it depends on the length of work. If it's short story, it may be, okay, great, crank it out, editorial pass, get it out the door, or get it off to the editor for it's an anthology or something like that. If it is novella, if you're getting into full length novels, that can be a lot more passes for me, because I'm right now working on a sci-fi trilogy, and it's been a while since I've done sci-fi. I got with a friend of mine. I was like, all right, I passed over about the first 25,000 words, and I'm like, is this a hot mess? So it really depends on how long the work is and how long it's been since I've been playing in a particular universe or a series or even a genre, to make sure my head is straight for the genre. So
Nice.
It's funny because sometimes when you feel it's a hot mess, sometimes you're that snobby student that it's like, oh, I think I flunked the exam, and then it's perfect, then you get an A. And other times it is a hot mess.
mhm.
Yes.
This time it was a hot mess, but it was more about structure than it was the story itself. He's like, no, story's great, characters are great, you're spending too much time hopping too fast. And I'm like, okay, because I've been writing too much short stuff, so it was very much about get the story out and done. And this is going to be a much longer piece. And straightening my head, it was more of a stylistic issue than it was the story itself, thankfully.
Yeah.
Anita, you write poetry. Is the process exactly the same, that you write it once and then you do a second do-over?
Kind of. Some poems don't really need. Some poems just come out and they're that, and I'm satisfied with it. And I edit. Sometimes I edit poems as I'm writing them too. Like I'm editing it. No, that's not right. And that needs a better rhyme and stuff like that. So sometimes the edit and the first draft are the same thing. Sometimes the first draft is the poem I'm sticking with, and sometimes I go back and after a while and tweak it.
I hadn't even considered editing on poetry because none of that was mentioned in the articles I shared with you guys. So JD, that was a great question to bring up.
Well, the thing is that depending on the collection that we're talking about, or the poem that we're talking about, for me it varies. Some poems I like the approach where it's like capturing lightning in a bottle. The poem that has won me prizes and stuff like that, I literally wrote in a napkin after I exited the movie Quills. I was like, I need a pen and I need a napkin, like super psycho. And then it's like, give me a minute. And I wrote in like 4 minutes. And that's won me like, third prize here and a first prize here, there. And it's the one that people go like, man, that poem is really great, which is absurd. And then there's another one. There's one Lovecraftian poem that I have you can find it either in Recollection, which has my first 5 poetry collections, or specifically in Relay of Rhymes. It's the longest poem I've ever written. It's 800 lines, 100 lines to 8 movements. Each one has its own rhyme scheme. So obviously, and it's the exploration of madness. So obviously that requires more in depth. And it's like, okay, I want this rhyme to be a lot more firm, and I want this to be free verse. And when you go free verse, people go like, oh, so that's like the first time you got it, you're done. And it's like, not necessarily, because sometimes you like 70% of the poem, but that 30% kind of bugs you. And you're like, let's rewrite that. Let's see how we can tinker with it. But yeah, sometimes it's a meticulous process that takes longer than you'd think, even if it's a poem.
Yeah, free verse can sometimes be more of a pain than when you're writing form poetry, because when you're writing form poetry, a lot of stuff it's structured, so you have to stay within the structure. So it's kind of actually easier, especially if you have repeating lines, because once you get one line, you just have to repeat it. You've got like 2/3 of the poem done. So, but yeah, free verse can sometimes need a lot of tweaking.
I am just in awe of anybody who writes poetry, period, let alone Lovecraftian poetry, because I would just be in a fetal position trying to come up with a rhyme for Argathoth. I would never get past that. So God love you.
Wayne, it's easy. Just drink something with a lot of sugar, or maybe a latte that gets a little bit of phlegm, and then start to say words, and you'll eventually get something that's Lovecraftian sound like.
Yeah. I thought it was all about the absinthe.
Absinthe doesn't help with phlegm, but it does make the heart grow fonder. So
that's too funny. So, guys, with your writing and everything, what do you find is the hardest part of the editing process? Oh, here I am getting tongue-tied.
I grew up, my mother was an English teacher. I grew up underneath the red pen, so I'm used to seeing people bleed everywhere. I'm like, but it's like I'm in first grade and my mother's whipping out the pen and striking through everything. It's like, I'm like, she's like, I could not teach your father grammar, but you will have grammar. The hardest thing for me often is not the grammar, the sentence structure, that sort of stuff. It really is making sure the developmental is done right. Make sure that the story itself is solid, making sure the characters are solid. That developmental pass, a lot of the times, the thing that people jump over. And if you've got that right, then the language that you need everything else to flow along is a lot easier. Knowing what dialect, what words, what language characters will use, how you describe scenes, how you describe what's happening in the action and whatnot. Once you kind of get that pattern down, you're sitting in a pretty good shape. But a lot of the time it is, do you have the story right, first of all?
Yeah, but the hardest part of editing for me is the proofreading and the commas. The horrible commas.
Yes.
The less said about that, the better. Anyway, but no, the proofreading, it's because I think the proofreading is the most tedious part for me. So my brain sort of tends to shut down, and I have to be careful about missing things. That's why I like to do the read out loud on either through Microsoft Word or Adobe Acrobat, because it's a lot easier to catch the typos and the miscues when you're listening to it than when you're reading it.
I love having people edit my stuff because I have learned that I cannot be trusted. When I write things, I happen to like them for the most part. And so I need somebody to kind of slap me upside the head. And this is particularly true in the stuff I'm writing now, because I spent almost 20 years as a professional stand-up comic. And so it's very easy for me to just go for the joke. Like I think of something funny and I go, oh, I'm going to put this in. But I write everything in first person, or most things in first person. So the joke doesn't always fit or doesn't, it sounds more like this 60-year-old guy than my 30-year-old protagonist. And so I need somebody to smack me upside the head and keep me in the proper voice, because otherwise I get entranced by my own brilliance.
Well,
That happens.
I think, yeah, well, I was going to say, I think this is the important thing, because Anita, you do a lot of your own self-editing. I do a lot of self-editing, but I know that because I usually work with at least 2 or 3 editors on anything that's longer to go through, and it's different people that will do story from line from proofing for me. Because again, I still have stuff slip through that have gone through 2, 3, 4. I've got one thing that's gone through 7 different editors, and there's a couple of things in there that I was doing a reading a couple of months ago at a convention, and I'm like, and that quote from Neil Gaiman comes out, of if that little bastard wants to survive that heart, he can just stay there. And yes, I'm paraphrasing because Neil Gaiman is much better at wordsmithing the fact of the little bastards are going to get through still sometime somewhere along the way. But again, I think it's critical to make sure you've got other eyes on it before it hits the public, because otherwise the public will be happy to tell you everything you screw up.
Oh,
Yeah,
people
well,
love correcting you. I saw someone that they wanted to ask something, and the thing is that if you ask something, people won't give you an answer or help you out. So the person had a fake account. So they asked something, and then with that fake account, they said something that they knew was completely wrong, and everyone started correcting the person that had said the incorrect answer just to give the information that the original person needed. It's like, oh, that's nice. I think it does speak a bit to the times that we're living, but it is what it is. In terms of the most difficult things, it's a 3-way tie depending on. Okay, when it comes to typos, typos will get through. They are annoying because your brain, when you write something, your brain reads it correctly. I've read paragraphs that are written with numbers, not letters, and you can still read it because your brain deciphers it and you see the words. And I've seen a paragraph written without vowels, and you can still read it. And your brain does that, and it tricks you, and it's wonderful how it betrays you. So when you're editing, the first thing is that if you see one typo, literally control find, and you'll see how many times you repeat that typo. I have one typo that will actually become a character in a future series because I've committed it so many times. Second, verb tense. I love my first novel, Only Human. If you like vampires that don't sparkle. I do switch from past to present, and I do that because that's how we often speak. We grammatically speaking, we're a cluster F. Although we get the message across on the page, it's a different story, and that's something that I've learned to get better at, but it's still something that I need help with. And finally, I'm writing the last book of that series, and developmental edits, and realizing that you have a character that hasn't appeared in 5 chapters and something that wasn't resolved from 10 chapters ago. And I had been writing a lot of short fiction and short stories and different things. And the skill set that you need to write an effective short story is kind of similar, but very different from a novel. And you can get away with a lot more stuff in a short story than a novel, just because it's less word count and you can go back and fix stuff. I'm realizing how much work it's gonna take for that last book, but I'm stubborn. So let's get on.
yeah, I'd also like to say that I do use beta readers and a professional editor as well, but I am very critical on my own work. So self-editing is pretty easy for me. It's like I have no problem getting rid of stuff.
And I literally don't see it's like the initial first edit I'm really good at, but once we get past that, and I think it's the way that I write, my first drafts are pretty good as first drafts go, but I can't be trusted because I literally don't see things that other people can see. I remember the second Johnny Lycan book. One of the main characters changed names halfway through the book, and I didn't notice it. To one of my beta readers went, wait, or not beta readers, one of my critique partners said, wait a minute, isn't his name Malcolm? And I went, oh, yeah, it kind of is. I'm completely blind to things once the initial draft is done. And then, when you get to fine proofing at the very end, I can sort of get back in the process. But there's a whole section there where my brain should not be left to its own devices.
It's not just you, Wayne. We're writers. None of us should have our brains left to our own devices. But I mean, because you've written it. Once you've written it, you've got it in your head. You've done that at some point along the way. And then if you go cut it, your brain may tell you, oh yeah, I still told that part of backstory. It's still going to make sense for somebody when they get along. But then you forget the fact that you cut it out. It's that clean read when you come through. Either I've got to let it sit for a month before I come back and do a clean read. Or, again, that's where beta readers and people like that come into play, is the people that go and read and say, this part doesn't make sense. I'm like, sure it does. Da-da-da-da-da is in there. They're like, no, it really isn't. And you're like, oh, I must have cut that out. And that's one of the reasons when I do cut stuff, it goes into a side document so I can go back and look and see what did I cut out that I may need to reincorporate. So at least I've got that level of shortcut.
That's actually a really good idea. We've got a couple comments here. JD says the grammar that is the gift that keeps on giving. And then Bach says, poet here, mostly free verse. I have to let things sit, just like Wayne. Otherwise, I miss the obvious things. But using a reader, real or computer should get those dupe words, etc. Good idea. And grammar, the elusive unicorn of writing practice. That it is.
I have to tell you, Bogey just said something really interesting around using computers and software. Like I use Pro Writing Aid, which is way more helpful for nonfiction than it is fiction, frankly. But what I find it good for is it points to all the rules that you're supposed to follow. And I will, accept. And then I go, no, damn you. I meant to do this. And this is a choice. And then, you kind of confirm it. But it picks up the little stupid things that will undermine your writing while still giving you the satisfaction of overruling your robot overlords.
Yeah. I agree with that. I use Pro Writing Aid too.
Yes.
Now, and I remember the first time that I used beta readers, the difference in quality of the book, because again, people catch stuff that you miss out on, and it also, some people's comments validate what you wanted to do, even if they didn't like it. It's like, why did you do this? I want more of that. And it's like, no, I wanted you to want more of this, and that's why I wrote it that way. And other times it's like, oh crap, I hadn't realized that. And obviously they also catch typos that you go like, oh, I hadn't seen that one.
Well, I always think about editing and feedback of any kind, right? There are three buckets. There's, holy crap, I never thought of that. That's great. And that's a very small bucket. It's cool when you get it, but it's a very small bucket. The second bucket is, need to think about that. And you give it some careful thought, and sometimes you accept it and sometimes you don't. And then the third bucket, which is this big giant bucket, which is thank you for your feedback.
Yeah.
And you have no intention of accepting it, but God love them for trying.
Indeed.
But if you think about it in those three buckets, it helps me get very undefensive about the feedback. Like I look at it and go, which bucket does this belong in?
Well, and I think that's one of those things that goes along with the hard part about looking at. I look at reading and writing as what I frequently just call a co-creation exercise, because the way you have no control over how the reader sees or views the world. You have no idea their experiences. You have no idea what they may have read in the past. So you don't know how those things are going to kick into and influence their view of the world. And so it's with every reader and every writer, it is a matter of co-creation, because I know what I'm spewing out that I have in my head, but nobody is going to perceive it exactly like I put it on the paper, no matter how precise, no matter how much I do to flavor the look, the feel, the design, whatever the case may be. They're still not going to experience exactly the same story I read, and no two readers are going to experience the same thing. So the fact that somebody may come across as to how they interpret something like, okay, yeah, that's way off. Which one of the 3 buckets does it fit into? And that's when you go and say, well, if 1 person out of 10 said that, I can put it over here. If it's 9 out of 10 said that, then I need to look at it over there.
Another interesting tidbit, I have a book called 2020, which is a bilingual collection. And in May, I released the all English version, which is 2020. Okay, so I translated the thing. The editing process was completely different because I had to consider it's the difference between a translation and a transcreation. A transcreation takes also into consideration a cultural context and different things. What does that mean? If I write something that only a Puerto Rican will write and then I translate it, most of the English speaking audience will go like, okay, so what's the point there? And there are some things that in a particular short story that were talking to the Spanglishized reality that is Puerto Rico. So it's stuff that as soon as you translate it, it loses its meaning. So several scenes I had to rewrite and add a different joke or a different twist to it just to make it make sense. And then I had to pass this to only all English-speaking people. The beta reading process for that one was very interesting because I had a lot of people that were like, "Oh, I'll read it," but it's people either from Puerto Rico, from Colombia, or from other places and they're bilingual. And I'm like, I don't need a bilingual brain right now. I need someone that only speaks English to make sure that I didn't mess up in the translation.
I was actually going to ask you, JD, and forgive me if I take this off, but you mentioned, you want an English speaker or a Spanish speaker, but especially with Puerto Rico, because my bride is Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
Do you find that even between different groups of Spanish speakers, you have that context and translation issue?
Well, when it comes to Spanish, if you talk to someone from Australia and someone from England and someone from the United States and someone from Canada, they're going to understand each other better than when you take a Puerto Rican,
right,
a person from Spain, a person from Colombia, and a person from different areas of Mexico.
Right, because they all think they speak the closest to Castilian.
But even Spanish people from Spain, it's like, yes, we are from the mother country. It's like, dude, you're no, okay, you're not perfect. The interesting thing there is that you have to be very, very deliberate with how you write Spanish. I'm working on a Spanish horror short story collection, and it's meant to have that Puerto Rican flavor. But again, to give you an example, the word straw. A straw is a straw in the United States, in Canada, in England, and in Australia. A straw in Puerto Rico is sorbeto. In Mexico is popote. In Colombia, it's pajilla. In Argentina, it's another name and another name and another name. And it's ridiculous how inconsistent it is. And I'm talking neighboring countries. Because one thing is Canada and Australia, or Canada and the US and stuff like that. And Canada has more French influence and other stuff like that. But it's seriously, from one Spanish-speaking country to the other, it is a comedy. And I have a job thanks to that inconsistency, because my day job is to make sure that whatever we communicate in campaigns is understood by the majority of people who speak Spanish.
Pretty awesome. We've got some comments here I'm going to go through. We've got quite a few. So, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name, my friend. Let's see. Hard to find a good poetry software, I would think. Deborah says a good editor will point out your patterns so you can learn from that and possibly get out of those habits.
Actually, to Deborah's point, that's why I like the critique group process, because if they see me, when we're writing, we have these Wile E. Coyote moments where we write and we're off the cliff before we realize we're off the cliff, right? We look down and it's like, ah! With the critique group, they'll catch me like by chapter 2, they're going, you do this, right? And I can pull back and kind of move forward, self-correcting as I go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And then JD added, since poetry itself messes with proper grammar, most software wants to correct stuff that actually isn't wrong, which is very true. I get that in my writing. I always attempt to bring a reader to an idea, but I also consider the reader a co-author that can take a poem in absolutely unexpected directions, and it's all good. And then personally, I would rather see the attempt to translate and be informed of the difficulty of translating, to know the idiosyncrasies of a culture's language as much of what that culture actually is. Well, at least you only have to translate into one language. True. So true. I have another poet that does that for me. So yeah.
Interesting. And again, when it comes to translating, it's super weird because I wanted to get people who only spoke English, because if you have a bilingual brain, you'll decode it, and if you're from Puerto Rico, you'll decode it the same way that I decode it. So it's something that has to be taken into consideration. And I was so nervous of translating something from Spanish to English. For a second, I thought it was going to be easier. And the thing is that I realized that I write very Puerto Rican. So if you use a text translator, it was completely useless to me, because it didn't get, if it got 30% of the translation correctly, I'm being generous, because I would read the translation. It's like one of the tools that you use a translator just to speed things up, and then I would read the paragraph and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to rewrite the whole thing.
Nice. Yeah. And he says critique, talking about if I have another poet that does that for me and critiques it, which also brings up the topic. When you mentioned using a critique group, and we've kind of touched on the topic of using beta readers, is there a specific method you think any author should follow with using those?
Find somebody who is heartless and willing to tell you the truth, because most of the time people that you share blood or bodily fluids with are going to not want to hurt your feelings. You need critique partners that are going to hurt your feelings.
To build on that, I would also say the critique partners that have helped you get there should not read it, because they've got Stockholm syndrome. And if they've gotten you to the end of the book, they're already invested in it. The second thing is, when you give it to beta readers, you should give the beta readers some guidance, give them specific questions to guide their thinking. Otherwise, this person will, read it and go, no, the plot makes sense. And this person will go, no, these characters, they'll give you different feedback, but it's not structured in a way you can use it. So when you give somebody beta reader, there's like a reader's guide that goes with it. And sometimes it's a couple of questions. Sometimes it's as many as 10 I've seen. But you want to guide their thinking as they're reading, so they're giving you feedback you can use, as opposed to, no, I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think an important thing is the amount of beta readers, and that will vary from person to person what works for you or works for a certain project. I've seen some people that have 12 beta readers, and I think that is beyond overkill, and that will just bring you more problems than solutions. You want an objective point of view, but you don't want to be flooded with feedback and information that will make it hard to make decisions about your manuscript or a poem or any specific piece. When you also, some people are there and they will have, oh yeah, we love you, you're awesome, you're magnificent, and that's great. And sometimes our egos need stroking, but more often than not, it needs to have, you need that whip to crack. Also, you have to. It's tricky because finding the right people to beta read you or to critique you. Some people, I'll just say it, are complete assholes, and they'll tell you how you should have written it because this is the right way to write it, and it's like, thank you for your service. And then there's other people that are honest but kind and nurturing. They will bring several red pens, and that's a type of beta reader that has worked for me. I always tell people, don't think about my feelings. Yes, they might get hurt. Yes, it might sting, but I need it. Right now, for the Spanish horror short story collection, I have 3 people that have beta read it or are beta reading it, and the feedback that I've gotten sometimes is brutal, but I need it because I don't write that much prose in Spanish, so I need people to. Yes, you care for me. Yes, you want me to do well, but bring it. And some people are like, is this suggestion okay? It's like, bring it. bring it, and I'll be the judge of that. I'm just thankful that you're taking from your time to help me.
Yeah, you want beta readers that are going to approach it as a reader and not necessarily as an author as well, because authors are great. They can critique the technical stuff, but you want a reader that will actually critique the story, like what works for them, what doesn't work as they're reading it. And like Wayne said, you're going to need the questions. That's why I use Story Origins Beta Reader Program, because everything's all set up there and it's really, really easy. And also, when you find a good beta reader, lock them in the closet and keep them forever.
Yeah.
Yes.
Remember, you have to feed them, though. You have to feed them. You
That is
can't just
true.
put them in the terrarium. And
Yep. We got a few more comments. I definitely see the issue, JD. They will lie correct. Heartless is correct. Perfect. Thanks, Wayne. Provide questions. And the poem is okay. The book is hard. Yeah, I have to agree with that.
And I also think depending on the genre, you'll accept more things than others. With poetry, I'm kind of a dick because I'm pretty intentional, and unless someone calls me out on something that I go like, oh, that was a mess up, I'll probably, that's why I don't beta read my poetry collections. I don't. Yes, I might share it with someone, or if they have like an observation, like there's a typo here, stuff like that, fine. But with poetry, I'm very intentional with how I go about it. And then with nonfiction, since yes, it's part of my day job, but I don't write it often. I might write it in the blog, but it's not my ace. It's not my strength. It's not something that I feel super comfortable or I've done it often. I try to get feedback from people who mostly write or read in that genre, because they'll pinpoint stuff that will definitely make it better. And then when it comes to fiction, for me, the main focus is, does it suck? Does it not suck? Are there lines of dialogue that really hit hard? And are you enjoying it? So what I get from beta readers from each genre definitely varies drastically.
Yeah, I agree with the poetry. I don't beta read my poetry either. It's too personal, and I can't take critique very well on the poetry at all. So
Yeah. Anybody have any more to add on that? Because if not, we're going to flip to the indie connection. You ready, guys? Here is a fascinating clip for you to watch.
Hey guys, C.O. Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press, bringing you another Indie Connection. Today I'm going to be telling you about some indie books that you might enjoy if you're a fan of Super Fudge by Judy Blume. I think we all read this in school and really enjoyed it, and now here are some indies with some similar options for you. The first book I have for you is called Brother Wars: The Big Apple by Stephen K. Smith. The last place 10-year-old Harry and older brother Randy want to be is stuck in New Jersey with her kooky grandma DeLuca and her wonder dog Mr. Muggles. But when she wakes them from a break of dawn train ride into New York City to watch her favorite singer Neil Floggins in concert on the Today Show, things go downhill fast. And that's all before they get lost in Queens and run into Joey P. and the Red Skulls. When Muggles disappears and Grandma is abducted, the often battling brothers have no choice but to work together to get them back. To do so, they'll have to fend off thieves, navigate the subways, and survive a chase through Central Park before time runs out. The second book I have for you is called Down with the Dance by C.T. Walsh. Meet Austin Davenport, whose fabulous luck landed him on this earth only 11 short months after his brother, Derek, putting them in the same grade. While Austin's brain power is unmatched, it appears as if his brother got all the athletic gifts and the family butt chin, meaning their parents love Derek more than Austin, or so it seems. Join Austin on his journey through the tumultuous waters of middle school as he navigates the swampy and undeodorized hallways and explores the depths of the cafeteria's seafood surprise. Oh, and someone is plotting to take down the Halloween dance, the one that Austin has his sights set on, so he can take Sophie Rodriguez, a girl way out of his league, but who doesn't seem to know it. Can he stay one step ahead of the new principal, who has it in for him? Will Austin figure out who the perpetrators are? Will he save the dance in time? Will he wear a diaper on a stakeout? The third book I have for you is called Embarrassing George by Kimberly Fox Morgan. Everyone in George's family is so embarrassing. His mom can't cook, his sister is constantly making kissy faces to her phone, and his brother's wardrobe consists of nothing but costumes. To top it off, George's dad is known for going outdoors in his underwear. Will family night at school reveal all of their quirks, or will George want to hide under his desk to avoid them? And the last book I have for you is called Mr. Nobody by Natalie Gordon. When 9-year-old Katie's gran comes to live with the family, Katie is forced to share a room with her moody big sister Lou. They soon discover that Gran has an imaginary, mischievous friend, Mr. Nobody. Before long, stockings are found cooking in the oven, and Gran is found wandering the streets in her nightie, singing along to Elvis. Then, one day, Gran does something that changes everything. Told through the eyes of 9-year-old Katie and her gran, Vera, Mr. Nobody explores how a family struggles to cope with the descent of the grandmother into Alzheimer's. Okay, that's all for me this week. I'll see you next week on the Indie Connection. Bye!
Those were great. We've got a few comments before we switch gears to this next topic. So Deborah says, a beta reader who reads in your genre can be good for helping you meet those reader expectations. A beta reader who does not read in that genre is less likely to give you a pass on problem areas. JD responded, so true. And again, there's a lot to do with chemistry, and some beta readers are just a better fit. And then your seafood surprise. And then I posted, agreed on that, Deborah. I always screen my readers beforehand for beta reading. But our next topic is the AI stuff involved with the editing process.
Are we talking about Grammarly and other such programs?
Yeah, Grammarly and like
writing aid.
Yeah.
For me, Grammarly, it's always like, stop drinking, Grammarly. You're drunk. It's like, you should write it this way. It's like, okay, so I should correct something that is not perfect, but to make it wrong. So then you can offer a proper correction.
And it always cracks me up how Grammarly's like, oh, you need to do it this way. And then you pull it up in Word and it's like, no, it's this way. It's like,
oh, they disagree. It's like I love Siri and Alexa to go at it. And I love to see MS Word and Grammarly just duke it out. I'd see that celebrity deathmatch in a minute.
No, because then you wind up with one AI to rule them all.
Oh my God.
And then there's no arguing with it. Like it is the ultimate AI, and thou shalt not argue with it. No, that I prefer to keep them kind of friendly rivals.
Don't you mean Google Writing Aid at that point?
Oh yeah. Joe says, stop telling me to put a comma there, Grammarly.
Well,
yes, definitely. That Grammarly and the commas. It's like, no, Grammarly, go away, Grammarly.
That should be. There should be a short story called Grammarly and the commas.
For real.
It's like Grammarly is the lead singer, and the commas are just messing up every song.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny with this stuff. I find it helpful, but you can't become a slave to it. Like mostly what I write, there's two things. One is mostly what I write is first person, and we don't think logically or correctly. And the second thing is, one of the things that I really like to do is dialogue and, you know, different voices. And we for sure don't conduct conversations that would pass any kind of robotic inspection. So I try not to take it personally and try to be really objective about how I take that feedback. It's helpful, but you don't want to just let it tell you what to do. At the same time, you don't want your ego to ignore good advice. So it's a tightrope.
Yeah. Go ahead, JD.
Sometimes characters want to say ain't and acts.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
if you're writing a colloquialism in that sentence, yeah.
I mean, I've actually gone to using primarily Pro Writing Aid. And even that, again, is meant for, it's a guideline. It's something that'll catch a lot of sins and tell you what you're doing. If you learn to use the tools for what they are, but you cannot live and die by them, because that's what will get you in trouble every time.
It's like the Pirate's Code. It's not so much code as it is guidelines.
because I've had people tell me, "Oh no, I used ProWriting or I used Grammarly and it did all my editing for me in my story. I don't need an editor," and I'm just banging my head on the table. And because I've been hearing a lot more of that too, with people going and say, "Oh no, I just ran it through Grammarly and it's perfectly fine." No,
It's
it's
people
not.
wanting to cut corners and cut costs and cut time, and 9 times out of 9, it's not gonna be a good result.
Yeah.
You have to put in the time, you have to put in the effort, and a fresh set of eyes for. That's why beta readers and editors are so important, because they're just gonna bring a different set of eyes to it, and your eyes are tired.
Yeah. I mean, I use ProWriting Aid, but mostly for like final proofreading before I send it to the professional editor. So
Yeah.
Same on that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it helps. It can help catch a lot of little small sins, but it's never going to tell you have a plot hole. It's never going to tell you, you know, that you've got certain kinds of problems or you've done certain things that you've cut something out of the story. It's never going to substitute for other sets of eyes on the story. It can help you. It helps as a good another proofreading layer. To me, it is the best it does.
Yeah, and
Yes.
one of the things that I do when I'm proofreading or editing is that I read it from the last sentence up, just because you stop, you're forced to read every sentence objectively. Um, that's for line editing and also proofreading. It just helps you, do it that, and just be a bit more efficient and just catch more stuff that other people won't catch. But still, fresh eyes definitely help, and they'll tell you stuff that you go like, oh crap, I've reread this 8 times and I had not seen that.
Yeah. 8 times rewriting and then still catching stuff. I
Well,
think I would cry.
eight time reading it and proofreading it and stuff like that, and then not rewriting. There's some people that write a draft and then rewrite the whole thing and then rewrite the whole thing a third and fourth time, and I'm like, whoa. I'm that's the different types of people of editing. I'm more of the write the first time, and if it works, just add and tweak and revise. And if it doesn't work, that's when I rewrite, especially with a novel, because some chapters they just flow. They're silky smooth. They're awesome. Your soul and your conscience is at peace, and other times it's just hot garbage.
yeah, well, I had a plot point in one of my books that I missed. 2 beta readers missed. The professional editor missed. And I only caught it because the professional editor had mentioned something else that had to do with it in a previous chapter. So it did get fixed before it got published, but that shows you how things can slip through.
Well, and then there's the detail that people say, oh, it's indie, so it's going to have mistakes. And I'm like, I just read 3 Goosebumps books. Out of those 3 books, 2 of them had typos. 1 actually had about 6 typos. How many people read, proofread, edit, and check this in the editing process? And working in advertising, you see some horror stories. Fortunately, my horror stories aren't that awful. It got to a client presentation. We got the feedback that there was a big mistake, and we were able to fix it. I know people who have printed 100,000 brochures with the logo of the competition of their client. So
Ooh.
Stuff happens, and we're talking about, there's 2 people working on it, copywriter and artist. They have a supervisor, they have a creative director, they have an accounts team, they have a vice president of the other team, they have a client, and sometimes in the client there's 2 or 3 people. So we're talking about upwards 8 to 10 people see that, and they don't see the mistake.
Wow. That's an impressive mistake.
But I mean, even looking at the largest trade publishers and whatnot, you will find typos in New York Times bestsellers. You will find typos in commercial work. This is the reason that often you will see, 18th printing, and it's the 5th version, is because every time they catch a few more things that they fix or they rewrite or they do small things, even in traditional publishing. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things of, and again, how much time, effort, and money do you put into it as a writer and a creator to publish and go through that effort is going to ultimately determine what level of quality issues do you have. Because I mean, no matter what you do, even the largest publishers have some quality issues. And so, yeah, somebody's like, oh, well, you had a typo on page 10. Okay. It still said "tuh." PEH. Okay, fine. That's the kind of stuff you can catch with tools. Other things, again, small things are going to make it through there. And this is the reason when I pulled out the Neil Gaiman pseudo quote a while ago, things are going to get through. And at some point you look and you smile and you nod at the little gremlin that's made its way through, and you move on, because it's not going to break anything most of the time.
You said something, and if this is off topic, stop me, Madilynn. There is an elephant in the room with indie publishing, which is, I think, one of the beautiful things about indie publishing is there are no barriers to entry, right? Anybody can do it. Anybody with basic computer skills can put a book out into the world without going through gatekeepers and big fives. And that's the beauty of it, right? The bad news is that anybody can put a book up and do it. And I talk to so many indie writers who, because they don't have the funds to pay for a really ultra super professional editor, don't take advantage of it. I mean, one of the reasons I published my fiction, I'm publishing Johnny Lycan through Black Rose, is they do the covers and the outline and all that stuff. And that means I have money for editors and marketing and stuff, right? It's how I choose to assign it. But a lot of indie writers don't have a lot of money to pay for editors and that kind of thing. And so they get on their high horse and say, I don't need them. How much does the cost of that, either time or money, play into how people edit their books?
Well, there are a couple of truths that we can talk about. Morally speaking, comedians are held to a higher moral standard than politicians, and I don't get that. And indie authors are held to a greater quality standard than traditional publishing, which I don't get that either. Because I've read, there's a series called Peter and the Starcatchers, and it's published by Disney Hyperion. It's got two authors. It probably has at least, I don't know how many editors and proofreaders. And those books are very good, but they're typo written. Which brings me back to the original thing. Yeah, people are going to bitch about a typo that you had on page 10 and one on page 28. And at the end of the day, it's like, did you enjoy the book? Because I've read books that have typos and I still enjoy them. And I've read books that have verb tense issues and other issues, and I still enjoy them because of the idea, the concept, the story, and stuff like that. And it just makes you question, why do people enjoy beating down on an indie? Because they do. They go like, oh, one of the reviews for Only Human, DNF at 6%. Was this even edited? Because they switched from verb tenses, and oh my god, it's like, why do they say that eyes are orbs? That is like so pat, and it's like, okay, dude, you didn't like the book. Thank you for your time.
By the way, you paid 99 cents for it on Kindle. So
no, let's not get into the price point, because people are willing to pay $6.50 for a mediocre cup of coffee on a cup that has your name with a typo or several, but they go like, oh, $2.99 for $1.
Yeah, they're willing to pay $100+ for a special edition of something like Brandon Sanderson books, or even just the slip covers. I mean, really. So yeah,
it's insane. I'm gonna read through a couple comments because we've got several. Joe says, great band name, Grammarly in the commas, back towards the discussion we had a little bit earlier. Deborah says, AI learns from us, so the more we use it, which is kind of scary.
Very.
If it's capturing sense on how your computer must ring with alerts, Mr. Nettles.
Which one? They're always chatting with each other, and at least one of them is flat and constantly banging the lid. Why?
That is too funny. And Deborah says, I'm glad it can't outright me. And then when I sold newspaper advertising, we required 3 sets of eyes before going to print, fresh eyes. And then we have Falca says, but the assumption that an indie is automatically going to be aired.
Look at that typo.
Yeah. All my books went through a mainstream publisher, but that doesn't mean I would not consider publishing indie. And then just as because they are jealous of the idea that you did something they always wanted to do, but don't have the skill, patience, and wherewithal. That's actually a great view of that, because that makes me feel really good, actually. That we've all got the brains and the patience to slowly work through our work to make it the best it can be, right?
Who's patient? You've met me, right?
That's true. But yeah, I mean, editing is it's rough. I actually kind of dread the writing process, the editing part of the writing process, but it's the necessary evil.
No, I'm the opposite. I dread the first draft. I like the editing.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's some people that like Excel sheets because you guys are psychotic, and that's fine.
Oh,
Yes.
I mean, I
thank
use
you. Thank you very
them,
much.
but oh, yes. So, guys, before we go around and share where we can find our work and stuff, I've got this clip of some stuff coming up in the following week, and then we can have our final thoughts. So here we go.
Hi everybody, Joe Compton here. I hope you're enjoying This Week in Indies. I wanted to tell you about Monday night. I will be hosting 21 Grams. It begins at 9 p.m. Eastern, and it is the third iteration of the show. And in this third iteration, we're going to examine three aspects of the creative soul: the cerebral, the emotional, and the practical. The cerebral will be about chess moves and deep thoughts that go into the aspects of the work and creating the work. The emotional will be all about the investment you have made in the work and creating the work. And the practical will be all about the application of common practices, tropes, and ideas. So, with that, we'll be welcoming our guest, Glenn Dahlgren, who is an indie fantasy writer and RPG game creator. But Glenn is great to talk to about all this stuff. He's got a great world out there that he created, and he's created several worlds and worked within worlds that have already been created. So this will be a great opener for our season. So I hope you come and join us Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we will be back with another 21 Grams thereafter later in the week on Friday. So we'll be having 2 episodes of 21 Grams this week. So definitely come and check us out live right here on the Go Indie Now Network. You know how to find it, and we hope you do.
That actually looks kind of entertaining, guys. Like, it was also a little like hypnotic and relaxing, the music with that.
Welcome to Joe's new channel, ASMR.
He had that deep voice going. It's like, yeah, we're gonna get groovy, baby.
Yes. So, what are y'all's final thoughts on editing and the editing process? Don't everybody jump at once?
Please do it. Try
Yeah,
it.
don't be afraid to tear your book apart and rebuild it.
Yeah, as daunting as that may seem.
To me,
Better, stronger.
I enjoy the editing process. That's not true. I enjoy having gone through the editing process because I know that collaboration usually ends up with a better product. You know, with writing, I did stand up for a million years. It's you think of something, you put it out there, and the audience tells you whether it's funny or not, or whether you need to work on it. When you're writing, it's like telling a joke and then waiting a year for the laugh. And so I think editing is really important, even if you think you're really good, even if you think you can catch your own typos, even if you don't really want to invest the time. I think it matters.
People by me saying people, me.
You're people.
Yeah, I am human. I am people. We fear the editing process because it's going to show us our shortcomings on areas of opportunity and where we fucked up. And that doesn't feel great. That said, finding a way to enjoy it, I say that it's traumatizing, etc. But oftentimes editing is rewarding because you catch those mistakes and you can make things better. And if you take that lens to it, that you're gonna make it better, that you're gonna make it more you, more closer to your vision, and not just, oh God, I gotta do this. Because if you just say, oh God, I gotta do this, it's always gonna be that way. And yes, I might trip and say, oh, it's grueling, etc. But from the first time that I had to edit my first novel to present day, yes, it's a pain in the ass, but it's a pain in the ass because it doesn't have to be that way. But it's, if you want to hold yourself to a higher standard than traditional publishing, because that's what people expect from you, it's a necessary part of the process, and making it enjoyable, it's just going to benefit you 1,000 ways.
Well, so I'll throw in one thing here. I was just on a panel at Dragon Con a couple weeks ago talking about indie versus trade publishing, and I've done both. And I do believe that there's way more money potential in indie publishing. There's a lot more potential. You've got a lot more flexibility. You can do a lot more things in indie publishing, but I still recommend there's value in at least going through some of the traditional process for a couple of reasons. Number one, editors will tell you kind of what they're looking for commercially. So in other words, what makes it saleable in that market. Number two, a lot of the time, if you're working with good pro editors at a publisher, because they've worked on a lot of different books, a lot of different stories, you get to learn from them as an editor. And I think that's the hardest part, is to find the editor that is a good partner, because again, it's kind of back to that co-creation thing of, even though you're writing, your story editor, your line editors are all there to help you polish and make you better, make the work better for the end reader. And I think that's really the hardest part, is not looking at the editor as an antagonist, but they really are a partner. And if you can get that process down right, you'll be a much better writer. You'll be a much better storyteller. And the editing process will become so much easier over time.
I'm going to pause you guys. We've got a question for you real quick. Let me get there. I'm going to pull up the stuff before that. Concussions really suck. So
Feel better.
yes. It actually looks entertaining, opposed to several shows I've done that weren't. Cool. I hope I wasn't on any of those. So Wayne, we need some stand-up set. Lean.
You know what? This is funny. I started in 1979 and I hung it up in 96, which means, it means I'm old as hell. But the other thing is that my career was pre-internet. So the only thing you can find, if you have 99 cents on Amazon, My Evening at the Improv does exist. It is literally the only piece of my stand-up available out in the world, but it does exist.
Okay, but that's kind of cool. It does speak to that you did it for the love of it and not to get Instagram likes. So cheers.
That's true. Very true. So
But
here's
now you
our
have
question.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to cut you off. Is poetry more saleable indie? So you guys that write it.
Anything is saleable,
Yeah.
sellable indie. The main thing is just striking gold. I've read excerpts of Milk and Honey, and I'm not impressed, but it sells by the truckloads because someone on BookTube thought that it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, said so, and other people liked that first person so much that they bought the book. So if you have someone with any sort of weight to their opinion that speaks positively, think Oprah. It's the Oprah concept. There's a bunch of trash books that she says you should read this, and people buy it because, oh my God, Oprah said it, and it can't be a lie. If you have someone say it that way, it's going to be sellable. In terms of whether it's better one or the other, there's so much luck that goes into publishing that people don't want to say up front. It's connections, it's luck, it's getting it in front of the right people.
Yeah, saleable has less to do with indie versus traditional than it does marketing, in my opinion. And also, it also depends on what kind of poetry you're writing, I think. Because if you're a very literary poet, then maybe you selling to magazines and periodicals and those literary things would be the way to go. But with me, like, I write fantasy poetry, sci-fi poetry, horror poetry, probably not going to make a sale there. So yeah, I think it kind of depends on what you're writing and how you're marketing it.
I have to say I'm one of Oprah's close buddies. So and then Deborah says, yes, it's about making a better story and giving your reader a better reading experience. So guys, I'm going to wrap it up a little bit, and we're going to share where our viewers and listeners can find you. And then we are going to spend the last 5 minutes hearing from Mr. Wayne. So let's start with you, Jim. Tell our viewers where they can find your amazing stuff.
The easiest place to find me is jamespnettles.com, which will link you out to most everything. Because right now we're rebuilding all the sites, new platform, new stuff, but jamespnettles.com will get you to it. Check out authoressentialsworkshops.com on the business side of writers. We've got a couple of new shows coming up on Continual, including I'm bringing back a couple of my old shows as well. You can get there by going to continualconvention.com, or the easiest thing is to find the Continual Facebook group. And then, of course, the Speculative Fiction Academy. I've got some more classes that'll be dropping out there, and I'm bringing in some more people, hopefully this fall and next spring, with more business classes for the SpecFic Academy. And I will be at Multiverse here in a couple of weeks in Atlanta, if you happen to be so inclined.
Thank you for being on the show today, Jim. JD?
Greetings, fellow humans. Thank you for first off, see that like button a bit below? Massage it, caress it, click it, punch it, do whatever you want. Just interact with it, because it just helps us to get to more people. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and on the YouTubes. Just look for JDEstradaWriter. My books are available digitally on the Zon, and all of my books are available on the Zon. But if you want signed and uniquely dedicated copies, there's a bookstore in Puerto Rico that's gonna need more business because of the storm. It's called Tazas y Portadas. You can find my books there. There's about 5 of my titles there. All of them, I took about 2.5 hours to dedicate each one differently from across books. So by all means, if you're going to buy my books, support a small business, because it's better than the Zon.
Yes. Thank you, JD, for being on the show. Anita?
Well, the best place you can find me is my website, afstewart.ca. And I also have a YouTube channel with a live interview later today, in fact. Also, I do the podcast Words That Kill for Go Indie Now. And I'm pretty much on most social medias except for TikTok.
Nice. Well, thanks for being on with us today, Anita. And I'm Madilynn Dale, and I'm repping Go Indie Now today. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, just like JD mentioned. Caress it, love it. Show us some love and appreciation. We work really hard to bring you some awesome shows. You can find all of my books, all of my work at my website here, thechaptergoddess.com. I also have a new show dropping with Go Indie Now coming up soon, kind of close to the end of the month, and it's called Character Driven. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be aired on Wednesdays. And now we are going to switch gears, and you guys are going to get the last 5 minutes with Mr. Wayne Termel. So here he is, my friends.
Dang, nothing like pressure. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come play in your sandbox. Matter of fact, I'm going to be on the character-driven show talking about one of the characters in the second Johnny Lycan book, not Johnny, interestingly enough. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks. I thought what I would do with my time is just give you a sense. The Johnny Lycan series is a change for me. I was originally writing historical fiction novels, and then got this bug to write urban fantasy, and everybody went, "Oh, you're going to ruin your brand." And I said, "What am I going to tick off both readers? I'll have some fun with this." And I love Johnny Lycan. Johnny is a 30-year-old guy trying to get his life together. He's trying to become a private investigator, except that he happens to be a werewolf. And this creates some challenges. The first book has been out for a while. The second book, Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker, comes out December 8th. So I thought I would read just a piece of Johnny Lycan and the Anubis disc to give you a sense. You can run right out and put this on your TBR pile. And then by the time you finish it, the new book will be out. So yay. So this is early in the book. Johnny has rescued a young kidnapped victim and gotten the heck out of there, but he's still in his werewolf form and he has steam to blow off. Chicago is an all right place to be a werewolf if you have to do it. The weather isn't too hot most of the year, a major consideration when you run around in a fur coat. And thanks to some careful city planning, corrupt Illinois politics, and rich people who'd rather leave their money to posterity than their ungrateful children, there were lots of parks and green spaces. Out in the burbs, there were over a dozen forest preserves and parks. It took about 15 minutes to get to my favorite county forest preserve. Pulling into the lot, I prayed there'd be no sign of a white Ford Explorer. Those patrols were a pain in my hairy ass. The coast looked clear. Finally, a break. With a wince, I got out of the low seat and conducted one more search for prying eyes. The October wind bit deep and cold, but felt good. The air smelled of rotting leaves, distant smoke, and rabbits. Out of the trunk, I got a clean set of clothes and set them on the passenger seat, then stripped off. Since it was a full moon and the second time tonight, it didn't take long to make the change, and Shaggy took over. As usual, I felt better, more me, which is precisely the problem with taking this form. Addicts say they're never more alive than when they're high. It's kind of like that, only the drug is in your bloodstream every minute of every day. Scoring isn't the problem. It's not drawing on that stash constantly. And hopefully that'll give you a little sense of what it is. Somebody said if Raymond Chandler wrote werewolves, I think somebody in the second book said if Jack Reacher was a werewolf, he'd be Johnny Lycan, and I think Johnny would aspire to that. So Johnny Lycan in the Anubis disc is out in the world now, and ta-da, Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker, which is where you take a nice boy from Chicago and bring him to Sin City, and madness ensues. So I really hope you will take advantage of that. You can learn about me, and I interview other authors. Maddie has been on my website at wayneturmel.com. You can find me on Twitter, my Facebook page, Wayne Turmel Author. I don't know what else to tell you except that this has been a blast. I love interacting with writers. I firmly believe when people say writing is a lonely business, they're wrong. I think typing is lonely. Writing is social. And so there you have it. From Las Vegas, my name's Wayne Turmel, and it's always time to go indie now. Darn it.